What's up everyone, welcome back to another DIY project on Use What You Got. Today we're going to make some floating shelves. I've got a 2x4 piece of sandy plywood. I also have just an 8-foot piece of 1x2. We're going to cut this for the edging and we're going to make some awesome shelves. So let's get into it. First thing I decided to do was cut the mitered edges for the trim. It's definitely easier to use a chop saw, and I just recently bought a table saw, so I wanted to challenge myself. So we cut down all of our pieces. These two are still slightly long, but what I'm going to do now, I'm going to use the inside of this cut to determine the final length of these boards. Once I find that, I'll cut the rest of that off, and then we'll be ready to glue. Here I'm cutting the plywood down to the final 20 inches of width. I was really trying to take my time on this mitered corner and creep up to the line versus just getting it in one pass. Just trying to stay organized. I went through each piece and either put an A or a B so I knew which piece went with which shelf. It was actually very helpful in the end. I did not have clamps long enough to do the length of the shelf. So I would suggest getting that if you can. Probably not ideal, but I did make sure that they were 90-degree angles. So I ended up having to do the glue up over several passes. That's that side, and then here's the other side. Not too bad. The offcuts were actually just the right thickness to be the supports in between the top and bottom shelf. So this is me gluing them, and I went pretty heavy on it because I wanted to make sure that they both held on real well. And then I just cleaned them down until they were dry the next morning. Almost time for some spraying. I'm gonna enjoy this while I do the next step. But these boards are looking kind of rough. We're gonna make them look better. I got something to show you though. Never really seen anything like this before. If you know what it is, definitely leave a comment. I'll talk about this in a little bit, but I kind of approached doing the wood filler like you would with drywall mud, and I shouldn't have done that. I would suggest just filling in the crack or the hole or the opening that you need to fill, and don't put much else on there because the cleanup is very difficult. So I wanted to clean up the edge of both of these shelves so they were the same depth. Now they have a nice square edge. So I really took my time. I had also changed out my 24 tooth blade to a 60 tooth blade, and I think that was really, really helpful. Get a nice clean edge. And because I put so much wood filler on these, I ended up having to sand them for about an hour, maybe even closer to an hour and a half, just trying to get rid of all the extra wood filler that dried up, because I didn't really want you to see it other than where it filled the cracks. Some people love sanding, some people probably hate it. But I think because I really took my time and I did it right, it helped tremendously. save yourself the hassle and don't use as much wood filler. But if you have to, take the time to sand it because you'll get good results. So I normally do brush on polyurethanes, but I wanted to try the spray polyurethane this time. I was not very happy with the coverage. I mean, it was super easy. I sprayed it in like 2 or 3 minutes, but in future projects, I'll probably go back to the brush on because it just soaks it in so much better, and I ended up having to do a lot more coats than I wanted to for this. It's been quite the journey, and show you guys where I am with the shelves at this point, but also hopefully share some of the things I've learned from this project and some of the things I would do different in the future, and hopefully any tips and pointers I can give you if you decide to make similar shelves. I'm actually fairly pleased with the way they came out. There are some simple things, like there are things I wanted you don't have to do, or I didn't really need to do. It's just something I wanted. But for instance, I did miter corners. You could do just butt joints. There's so many different joints and ways to bring corners together. Like, this is just what I chose to do. I had to sand this down so much that literally the top part of this 1/2-inch plywood was literally coming off. If you're cutting miters and just 1x2s and stuff like that in general, use a miter saw. I don't have one, and my table saw is just right off to the side. I was trying to figure out how to use this because it was new and I wanted to challenge myself, and this is what I invested my money into recently. But figure out a way to get a miter saw, like a chop saw. This was so much more difficult and took so much longer than it should have. And that's okay for me, but it might not be the same for you. I use this Minwax wood filler, very popular wood filler, gets the job done. I wish that I had not spread it so far away, wherever what needed to be filled in. I kind of treated it like drywall mud. Some of you may be able to comment on this due to your experience, but this is not drywall. I shouldn't have done that. Just fill in the gap. Fill in the hole, whatever it is. Don't put a lot of extra. I think I sanded for at least an hour straight, maybe closer to an hour and a half. I did this on purpose because this was what I had in my mind. This is what I wanted to try to do. Is this for everyone? No. Is there better ways to do it? Of course. This is the first time I've ever made a floating shelf, so I was learning. I've been thinking about getting a kit like this for a little while, and I finally went on Amazon and I picked this up. It was $20 for 15 router bits, and I'm going to use the 1/4-inch one just so I can really take my time, and I'll throw this down in the description. So I'm using my table saw and my fence to clamp it to so that doesn't go anywhere, and we'll go ahead and plug this in and get started. So of course I wrote my lines using the wall bracket as the template. What I should have done is given myself a little bit of extra room on the top and bottom, so when I mounted it, it could move around a little bit. And then also, you have to account for the screw that's coming out of the wall that's actually holding the bracket in place. So I should have probably added just a touch more depth where the screw hits the wood. And the other thing I would highly suggest, if you can, I don't have one, and I haven't made a jig to do it either, get yourself a drill press. Or find a way to make sure you drill your holes straight, because some of them were straight and some of them were not. And that made it really difficult to mount it to the wall. So here I'm finding the center of the toilet, because I wanted the shelves to be centered with the toilet, which was about 15 inches. And once I found that, I went up, I think it was 18 off of the top of the toilet, and then I went up another 12 inches from there for the second shelf. But what I did is I put a piece of tape on the center of the shelf, then I drew a line on it so I knew where the center of the shelf was. So I lined up the center mark on the wall with the center mark on the shelf, and then what I did was I found the hole where the bracket was going to be mounted, and I just measured from the center of the board out to that hole to find out where that should be. From there, I was able to drill the holes for mounting on the wall itself. And then I repeated the process for the second shelf, and the whole time trying to make sure everything was level. Ideally, you would drive your screws into a stud, but the stud happened to be right in the center of both of the shelves. I'll put the link in the description, but we have these wall anchors that you do not have to drill a hole to put in the wall. And then on top of that, each one is capable of holding 75 pounds. So I ended up using 4 per shelf. So I'm pretty confident that neither shelf will fall down.